Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us here at the News and Politics show on Thursday, a very cold one. Ray Whitcomb, as he does each Thursday, comes and gives his big view here in the studio. We always appreciate his time and perspective. Someone else we also appreciate coming in each week, Bob Whitcomb, should be around the corner here to talk about
Lurking.
Happy holidays.
Same to you.
Merry
Same
Christmas.
to you. Only a few days to the Feast of the Circumcision.
And you also had a reference to Saturnalia.
That's right. That's sort of an old-fashioned term. That was in Roman days. They'd have a wild party this time of year.
Did you have a wild party this time of year?
I don't remember it, so I guess it's pretty wild.
So far, so good. So speaking of wild,
I'm trying to wake up from it, in fact.
He just got out of bed, came on down here into the studio, won't miss GoLocal
go back
Live.
home and go back to bed, which is right. I was like Winston Churchill. I do most of my work in bed.
Speaking of which, the movie coming out, do you plan on seeing it?
Yeah, you mean
The Darkest Hour.
Yeah, The Darkest Hour, I do. I plan to see it. That was a fascinating time. That's a pivot point in the history of Western civilization. May and June of 1940. And a lot of historians take issue with the great man theory of history. But I think you could say that in those weeks and months of that summer, Winston Churchill saves Western civilization by hanging on, not by winning then, but by not being defeated, by not surrendering. And he's certainly, a huge figure in our history.
It looks like a good movie coming out shortly. I probably will take it. I'll take it in. But let's talk about last week's column. It was very well read. These headlines.
It's terrifying when that happens.
These headlines that you come up with, it's the combination of all the subjects that you were writing about. But driving while stoned.
Topless body, or is it headless body?
Headless body and
top.
that you can't top that headline. But
No.
driving while stoned.
Yeah, driving while stoned. Yeah, and texting while stoned. I think that's what we're worried about. So I got sort of angry over a couple of people saying, "What about drinking?" And I said, "Well, this just adds another layer. Why don't you complain about drinking while texting and driving?" Well, because that was about pot, which is now legal, and there are very few constraints on, very few regulations that I can see that you can impose to stop people from misusing these medical compassion outlets.
Well, we do have medical marijuana here. They have
But
the
is it really
commission.
medical, or is it just people want to get stoned?
Well, I'll tell you.
Not that I would know anything about that, even though I'm a child of the 60s. Actually, a child of the 40s.
If you're a betting man,
Yeah.
did they legalize it here next year?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure they will. Well, we don't know what the federal government's going to do.
True.
See, the big kind of joke in this whole thing, it's still illegal. And the government has kind of looked the other way. We know Donald Trump does not like drugs, and he doesn't like drinking, in part because his
Brother's an
brother
alcoholic.
died of it. And Trump had said a lot of nasty things about being drunk and getting stoned and all this stuff. And some of his Tea Party supporters the same thing, even though the states where the Tea Party is most powerful has the highest rates of addiction. But, oh well.
Go figure. But I'll tell you, Forbes put out a list just this week about states most likely to. Rhode Island was not on that short
That's
list.
interesting. Massachusetts on the list, Connecticut.
Well, Mass already going legal, going
I
full
tell
scale
everyone's stoned with the
legalization.
Merritt Parkway. I can testify to that.
But I think Rhode Island and Connecticut were on the list of possibilities, so it was sort of in like that B list of potential.
Well, the thing is, Rhode Island's so tiny, it's got a little over 1 million people, it always has to follow Massachusetts. No, seriously, on almost everything. Massachusetts is such the economic and sociological power of New England, and it's the richest state and all this stuff, that we almost have to follow it. I've always thought the old Providence Journal, I used to tell them, said, you need more people covering the legislature in Beacon Hill than here.
Keeping tabs on what's going on up there. Well, we're
Yeah.
going to see what happens with marijuana in Massachusetts. But we're at the end of the year. We're looking ahead. GoLocal this week did 17 who made an impact in 17.
Right.
We're going to be coming out with 18 to watch in 18. What are
Yeah.
you looking forward to in 18?
What next? Well, I think next year, I think it's likely that the Democrats will take at least one house of Congress. I think that'll happen. I'll have egg all over my face, scrambled egg, but I suspect Gina Raimondo will be reelected. partly because of the divisions amongst the Republicans. The Republicans are a very tiny party
And
anyway.
Joe Trillo running as an independent.
Yeah, Joe Trillo running as an independent, drawing off, Tea Party votes. So I think it's likely she'll be reelected. I'd guess that. And then she may or may not be hoping that a Democrat gets elected in 2020 and she joins the cabinet.
Well, we shall see.
4 years later than she thought she would. Maybe.
We're clearly in cycle here, looking at 18. But before we get to 18, when we get to this weekend, because it is still December 31st, what do you got on tap for your column this weekend?
Well, let me see. Okay, I by the way, first of all, I sent in my check to prepay my property tax.
That is the big thing right now.
Do that. We did that. It might have been a mistake. I don't know. Well, I write about infrastructure. I sort of wish the Congress and Trump had started out with an infrastructure bill instead of trying to kill the ACA, Obamacare, which apparently the majority of people actually decide they like, even though it's it's sort of on death watch. I wish they had started with the infrastructure. We desperately need infrastructure. A big infrastructure program would employ a lot of people and make the country more competitive. I'm a little leery of these public-private deals, financing deals. I think that could lead to a lot of corruption and tend to jack up the price, too. So, but I think it's absolutely essential. I do commend Mr. Trump and people in Congress saying, yeah, we've got to have an infrastructure deal. Maybe finally we can do something on a bipartisan basis because everybody agrees we've got to fix our roads, bridges, highways, railroads, and so on.
Now, had you seen his tweet after the unfortunate rail accident out in Washington, where the first tweet response was, "This is,
that wasn't an infrastructure thing. That was clearly operator error.
But to
the
have
guy
that
was
first
going 80 miles an hour in what was it?
30 mile per hour zone. But the president took the opportunity to use it for a political platform.
Everything. Everything is a political platform, or not just political, self-referential. Everything is self-referential. This guy takes narcissism he takes it up exponentially every day. It's just astonishing.
Well, you think infrastructure is going to go through?
I think something like that will go through, and I think because it's something that both parties could take credit for. I think we should remember Reagan's famous line, which he got from somebody else: "It's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets credit." And I think this is a case where both sides could take a lot of credit.
So, of course, it's politics, but you've clearly got something literature, environmental related on that sheet.
Yes. Did I put that? I didn't see. Yeah, well,
I'm looking at your cheat sheet.
Well, there's a new study on tidal power that's being done by a guy at UMass and a guy from Princeton, which I think is very helpful. Tidal power for generation electricity. I thought of that because it was a cold snap. Price of gasoline is going to go up, so presumably the price of electricity is going to go up. I also hope that the earliness of this cold snap means the later in the winter it's going to be milder. That sometimes happens, so I'm kind of praying for that. I wanted to talk about also the mayor. The mayor has announced he's having a child with his girlfriend. Now, I know this is ultimately his business. I wish he'd get married. There's a huge, as an example, as a leader, there's a huge correlation between what we used to call illegitimacy and poverty and all kinds of other social pathologies. I wish he'd set an example and get married. Not that marriage, as my wife will testify, not that marriage is any great panacea for many of our ills, but I think as the chief executive of a pretty good-sized city with plenty of inner-city ills, he should do that. I've got to also note environmentally, apparently we are maybe in a more serious earthquake zone than I thought. National Geographic did a story about an upwelling of warm rock.
We had the professor on yesterday.
Oh, you did? I didn't see that.
From Rutgers University.
Of course, I was in sleep in bed all day.
Vadim Levin.
National Geographic?
He is the professor involved with the study.
Great story.
He did it in conjunction with a Yale professor and students as well, and found that Berkshire,
it's moving up.
It's moving up. And so he was funny, though. He said that a lot of news coverage of it called it, molten lava. He's like, it's just a hot blob. It's going to take millions of years. But this new technology that they had, they never knew this before.
Well, it may be more unstable, though, than we thought. And the other thing to remember is the Adirondacks are actually rising. New England mountains, I don't think, are yet. Which creates a certain amount of instability. That doesn't mean we're going to have another San Francisco earthquake.
But it was interesting to find out, because you think that we tend to be pretty staid here in New England, but we got hot rock, baby.
Well, our psychological instability would be mirrored in our geological instability. So anyway, I say a few words about that. I said nice words about Nikki Haley. I don't agree with what some of the stuff she says.
Oh, I thought
think
that was
she-
more Healy. I'm sorry.
No, Haley. Yeah, well, that's next.
That's another story.
Nikki, the UN ambassadress. I think, while I don't agree with her endless denunciations of the UN, we need the UN for all of its innumerable flaws and huge expense accounts. But she is impressive, I have to say, a very impressive speaker. She apparently is very good at doing deals with the other diplomats. She's become, a really impressively articulate and forceful representative of the country, the UN.
Well, she's certainly one to watch in 18, especially with
Yeah.
what's going on with Israel
I think
right now.
she could well, in fact, I'd be surprised when Rex Tillerson goes, which may be sooner rather than later, she'd probably take over from me. She'd be more impressive in that job.
The predictions, according to Bob Whitcomb, always appreciate
That's
them. Well,
right.
we'll catch you back in studio
Okay,
soon, Bob.
sure,
We'll let you
okay.
around the corner.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Bon
New
année.
Year.
Okay.
We'll see you in the new
Happy
one.
New Year,
Okay.
everybody.